Good afternoon. Welcome to all, the people here in the room and the people joining us online. I would like to start by welcoming the excellencies that are joining us today, friends, dear guests, and everyone else to this side event from data to national and regional journeys, renewing commitment to end the death penalty for drug offenses. Let me start by thanking the organizers that bring us together today, Harm Reduction International and Amnesty International, and to all our co-sponsors, Australia, Belgium, Canada, Colombia, Costa Rica, Czechia, the European Union, Mongolia, New Zealand, Pakistan, Switzerland, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, the Pompidou Group in the Council of Europe, and Justice Project Pakistan. This side event aims to address the use of death penalty for drug use offenses in light of recent trends and learn from recent national experiences and explore actionable avenues for reforming death penalty and policy and practice both at a national level and through international cooperation with particular focus on the role of Vienna-based bodies. Without further ado, we will start with the opening statements that reflect on domestic trajectories of countries which have abolished or are restricted use of the death penalty. The first statement is by His Excellency Tsengeg Mijiddorj, Ambassador of Mongolia to the UN organizations in Vienna. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the Harm Reduction International and also the other organizers for providing this opportunity. And also, I'd like to extend my appreciation to all participants, especially the speakers, as well as those who are online. Drug-related offenses are serious crimes that threaten human health, safety, and social stability, as well as values such as family well-being and protection of future generations. However, even in the face of these serious concerns, the death penalty cannot be considered an effective solution. The death penalty may also reinforce cycles of violence rather than prevent them. Instead of relying solely on punitive approaches, justice systems should prioritize prevention, rehabilitation, and reintegration into society. The 2025 World Drug Report highlights the continuing expansion of the global drug market, including rapid growth of synthetic drugs and the record levels of cocaine production. These developments demonstrate that even in regions where harsh penalties exist, the drug-related crimes continue to persist. Mongolia abolished the death penalty de facto on January the 1st of 2010, when then the President of Mongolia announced a moratorium on capital punishment. This decision reflected a strong commitment to the protection of the right to life. However, the transition from moratorium to full abolition is often a long and a careful process. It requires sustained engagement from the legislative branch, as well as meaningful dialogue with the public. During this process, it is essential to raise awareness and ensure that citizens understand the human rights principles, legal safeguards, and social benefits associated with abolishing the death penalty. Public discussions, advocacy campaigns, and educational initiatives play an important role in helping society understand that justice can be upheld without resorting to capital punishment. Following sustained advocacy by the National Human Rights Commission of Mongolia, together with international and civil society organizations, legal professionals, and academics, the Parliament of Mongolia ratified the second optional protocol to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights on the 13th March 2012. Subsequently, the revised criminal code removed the death penalty from the list of criminal sanctions, and this entered into force on the 1st of July 2017, marking the full and formal abolition of death penalty in Mongolia. In recent years, however, there has been a concerning trend in which some have considered reintroducing the death penalty or slowing progress toward abolition in response to rising transnational crimes such as drug trafficking and terrorism. Nevertheless, the international human rights community must continue encouraging states to carefully reconsider whether the death penalty truly achieves its intended goals. Our continued international cooperation remains essential. We must work together to encourage more states to join the global movement toward the moratorium on death penalty and to strengthen their commitments under international human rights. I'm confident that today's side event will provide an important opportunity to demonstrate that the path toward abolition is both realistic and achievable while maintaining open and constructive dialogue among all countries. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for your statement, Ambassador Mijiddorj. Now, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Aqeel Malik, Minister of State Law and Justice of Pakistan, to deliver his statement on domestic trajectories focusing on Pakistan. Welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Let me begin by thanking the organizers for this event, Harm Reduction International and Amnesty International, and all the other partners who've made this discussion possible. I would like to acknowledge and thank the governments and the institutions that have supported this side event. And for Pakistan, this gathering carries particular significance. This is the first time that the government is actually proudly co-sponsoring this event. And I understand that this is the first time that we have co-sponsored a side event at the CND itself, and specifically that addresses the death penalty. The steps are very important that have been taken thus far, and it reflects a clear and growing institutional commitment within the government of Pakistan to pursue more humane and proportionate responses to drug offences. Pakistan's position today is clear. We do not support the death penalty for drug offences. In 2023, Pakistan abolished the death penalty for drug offences under its narcotics law. The decision followed careful reflection within our justice system and a sober assessment of how the law was actually functioning in practice. For many years, death sentences were being imposed in drug cases, yet none of those cases, when they reached the superior courts, or great majority of them, if not all, particularly the Supreme Court of Pakistan, the death sentences were overturned 100% of the time. This created a deep problematic situation, and individuals were being sentenced to death, but those sentences were not legally sustainable. As a result, many people remained on death row for a long period of time while their cases slowly moved through the judicial processes. That situation served neither justice, dignity, or public safety. From a legal perspective, it demonstrated that the punishment itself was disproportionate and incompatible with the constitutional safeguards. From a policy perspective, it showed that the death penalty was not functioning as an effective deterrent. There was no evidence that its existence reduced drug trafficking or drug-related crimes. And from a human perspective, it raised serious concerns about dignity and fairness, leaving individuals on death row for years for offences that courts ultimately determined did not warrant such punishment, which was not consistent with the principles of justice or our system that seeks to uphold justice. For these reasons, Pakistan made the decision to remove the death penalty for drug offences from our legal framework. This reform reflects a broader recognition that responses to drug-related crimes must be proportionate, evidence-based, and consistent with the fundamental human rights. At the same time, we recognize that reform is an ongoing process, and at Ministry of Law and Justice, we're continuing to work to strengthen the justice sector responses to drug offences in ways that promote fairness, accountability, and proportional sentencing. One example is the introduction of judicial training course on the international guidelines of human rights and drug policy. This course familiarizes the judges with international standards of proportionality, due process, and treatment of vulnerable groups in drug-related cases. Another initiative is our work to strengthen the legal aid system so that individuals charged with drug offences have access to effective legal representation. We at Legal Aid and Justice Authority have launched a pioneer digital legal aid pilot project in Rawalpindi Jail that is providing effective, gender-sensitive legal representation to women facing drug charges. These efforts reflect a broader commitment of the government to move towards justice responses that respect human dignity while still addressing the harms associated with drug trafficking. At the international level, Pakistan is also keen to engage in dialogue and exchange with other countries drug policy challenges that are complex, and no single country has all the answers. This is why forums such as CND are so important, as they allow us to share experiences, learn from one another, and identify approaches that work. Pakistan comes to this conversation not as a country that has solved these issues, but as a country that is actively engaged in reform and willing to learn from experiences of others. We are particularly interested in exchanging lessons in proportional sentencing, alternatives to incarceration, and justice sector mechanism that can better protect the rights of the individuals while ensuring effective responses to drug-related crime. Let me conclude by reiterating Pakistan's appreciation to the organizers for creating a space for such discussion, and we're committed to continuing this dialogue and working together with partners across the government, international organizations, and civil society to advance more humane and effective approaches to drug policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Important steps taken by both your countries, very interesting examples of what we need to move forward. Now I'd like to introduce our first panelist for this event, Ms. Giada Girelli. Giada is a senior analyst for Harm Reduction International, working on issues at the intersection of human rights and drugs control. Ms. Girelli will provide an overview of the use of the death penalty for drug offenses in 2025 and the key learnings of the report. Welcome, Giada. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, and thank you, Ambassador and Minister, for your important remarks. I'll be very brief. I'm keen to hear from our other speakers, but I'll take just about 5 minutes to walk you through the key findings from AICHR's 2025 Global Overview on the Death Penalty for Drug Offenses. You can find some highlights on the tables as well, pause on who's mostly impacted by this measure, and then address why we believe it's important to have this discussion here in Vienna. So in terms of key trends, we can safely say that 2025 was a record-breaking year for the death penalty for drug offenses in the worst possible way. AICHR confirmed at least 1,212 executions for drugs in 5 countries. This is the highest figure in 20 years, and it's also a partial one. Hundreds more executions remain uncounted because of lack of transparency by the part of retention states or state secrecy. Executions continue increasing at a dramatic pace. This was a 97% increase from 2024, which mirrors a 97% increase in drug-related executions in both Iran and Saudi Arabia. Singapore and Kuwait also contributed to the trend to a lesser extent. Moving from practice to policy, we also saw some rare legal reforms. So in the past few years, we mostly saw reforms aimed at reducing use of the death penalty for drug offenses. We had examples in Vietnam in 2025 and in Pakistan and Malaysia in 2023. In 2025, actually, we had 2 states, Algeria and the Maldives, expanding applicability of the death penalty to drug crimes. And this is for us a bit of a concerning signal of a normalization of this measure as a tool of drug control. Now moving to who's impacted by this measure. We don't know many of the stories of the people sentenced to death and executed because of lack of transparency, but available information tells us that the death penalty is not reserved to the most powerful actors in the drug market, as many retentionist countries claim. It is actually overwhelmingly couriers and other low-level figures who are disproportionately affected, and this is inevitable due to the structure of the drug market and the ways drug laws are designed and enforced, but also makes the death penalty inevitably ineffective at countering drug use and drug crime. We can also say it's mostly people at the margins. Over a fourth of all executions were against ethnic minorities and over 20% against foreign nationals. And these groups tend to traffic drugs across borders because of coercion or economic deprivation. And then when they get caught in the criminal justice system, they face very specific challenges, for example, around consular assistance, fair trial, lack of legal assistance and interpretation. We also documented a record 23 women executed. This is again a record figure, and many of them were arrested, some of them executed together with their husbands or partners, and available information tells us they were likely accomplices in the crime rather than the main culprits. Now, why do we believe it's important to have this discussion here in Vienna? No, thank you. Probably the key finding from this year's report, which is also in line with last year's report and with research by other organizations, including Amnesty International, is that executions for drug offenses accounted for around 40% of all executions globally, meaning almost 1 in 2 people executed around the world in 2025 was executed because of drug crimes. And this weight of drug control on death penalty practice implies that we cannot just leave the death penalty be a side note in Vienna's discussions. Drug control is also never a purely domestic consideration, so debates in this forum remind us that the drug market is inherently and inevitably transnational, and that policies undertaken at domestic level are in pursuit of goals and priorities which are set in the drug control conventions and here in Vienna. And so we can just shrug off the death penalty as a national decision and consideration. So there's more that the international community and Vienna-based bodies specifically can and should do. Next slide, please. First of all, we need more information. Transparency is a core obligation of retentionist states, yet many, if not most, death sentences and executions remain unknown. And the international community, including UNODC, can and should do more to obtain this information from states and then to disseminate it among policymakers and other actors. Secondly, we need a robust assessment of how the UN family in its entirety can be better aligned in the promotion of evidence-based and effective drug policies at domestic, regional, and international level, including in the design and implementation of anti-drug programs. This includes a reflection on how system-wide coherence on this issue can be promoted, particularly at a time of limited resources and restructuring. And one opportunity, of course, is the independent expert panel. And we hope they will take this issue forward and carry out a robust assessment of the use of this measure. And finally, we need evidence-based discussions among all member states, abolitionists or retentionists, to constructively assess whether and how capital punishment promotes or rather hinders the pursuit of shared goals, meaning the promotion of the health and welfare of humankind and the commitment to promote all human rights and human dignity in the implementation of drug policies. There are many upcoming moments that can host this discussion, this session, intersessional sessions, the development of the new UNODC strategy, and these moments we believe should be capitalized upon for an evidence-based reflection on whether it is still acceptable that shared commitments are pursued through an ineffective, harmful, and ultimately legal practice. So I'll stop here, but we hope this side event will not be a one-off, but rather, one of many pieces of a broader conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Giada, for your presentation and for the report, which is very comprehensive and exhaustive. Our next panelist is His Excellency Edmund Bon, whom will be doing his intervention online. Mr. Bon is currently representative of Malaysia to the Asian Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, where he spearheaded discussions on human rights-centered drug policies. He's also the head of chambers at AICHR Bonn and a leading firm engaging in civil, criminal, and human rights litigation in Malaysia. Mr. Bon will share insights on developments on the death penalty for drug offenses, both in Malaysia and in Asia. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Excellency Olga, Marta, Permanent Representative of Costa Rica to the United Nations in Vienna, Excellency Tsengeg, Mijiddorj, Permanent Representative of Mongolia in Vienna.
Sorry, Mr. Bon, we lost your audio, if you can hear us.
So I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Now we can hear you.
My fellow panelists, Dr. Sato, UN Special Rapporteur on Iran, Ms. Giada, Girelli, Harm Reduction International. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me once again to participate in this important discussion. When I first spoke in 2024, I focused my intervention on the national experience of Malaysia. My country went from carrying out its last execution in 2017 to establishing an official moratorium on executions in 2018 and eventually abolishing the mandatory death penalty and imprisonment for natural life, as well as repealing the death penalty completely for 7 offences in 2023. The resentencing process that ensued saw the number of people under sentence of death lower from over 1,200 before the reforms to approximately 50 confirmed death sentences afterwards, in just over a year. I cannot understate the importance of these achievements, yet it has been a journey not free from obstacles, all largely centered around the perception of the death penalty as a just and effective punishment. A key factor in driving this positive change has been studying and informing key stakeholders and the public on the realities of the death penalty, that at times it has been unfairly applied, it is disproportionate, and it has affected those at the margins of our society from most disadvantaged backgrounds. A punishment that is not only in contravention with international human rights law and standards, but which has also failed to completely deliver on its promise of safety. The death penalty is irreversible. It cannot be undone, unlike any other punishment. If the justice system makes a mistake, be it due to faulty evidence, mistaken identity, inadequate legal representation, or unreliable witnesses, that error becomes permanent. And it comes to say that no justice system is perfect. Every system is capable of mistake. We also need to acknowledge that the death penalty often accentuates the broader social inequalities. Around the world, those who face capital punishment tend to be the poor or marginalized. They are also more likely to have limited access to effective treatment. This is inequalities. Malaysia's resentencing process has now concluded. The government is in the process of reviewing death penalty as a form of punishment in the criminal justice system. Hopefully, the next step will be a complete abolition. We progressively shift away from the use of the punishment. Other critical issues have come to the fore. These include to support those transitioning back into society after decades of death, criminal records of employment opportunities.
Sorry to interrupt you again. We seem to have a problem with your microphone.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's sometimes it gets cut off. So as we progressively shift away from the use of the punishment, other critical issues have come to the fore. They include the urgent need to support those transitioning back into society after decades of death row, impact on criminal records, on employment opportunities, and the implementation of comprehensive education and rehabilitation programs for facilities. The need to focus resources on tackling these root causes of crime have become even more urgent. When talking specifically about the death penalty for drug-related offences, it has been impossible to divorce this conversation from the need to relook at some of the underlying assumptions or responses to the drug trade. Some ASEAN countries have begun to challenge the highly punitive and stigmatizing approach of law enforcement while advocating for a move towards harm reduction and health responses. Legal reforms on this issue have been under active discussion in the past couple of years. Malaysia has not been alone in moving forward in this journey in Southeast Asia. Vietnam and Thailand have adopted reforms and initiated measures to achieve more proportionate and affordable responses while expanding access to health and social services. Commutations for drug-related offences have also been seen in Indonesia and Singapore. At the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission on Human Rights, AICHR, these key human rights issues, among others, are regularly deliberated on. While any progress is encouraging, there is no hiding that the continued retention of the death penalty hinders human rights progress. In my view, drug-related offences do not meet the threshold of the most serious crimes under international law. Complaints about mandatory death sentences, unfair trials, restricted access to legal counsel from arrest, and the lack of mental health assessments are some of the cases we receive. These are not merely legal issues, but they are matters of justice, dignity, and humanity. As much as regional cooperation has been a key feature in law enforcement, it is critical that we reflect on a changed approach as a region. It is in this context that as Malaysia's representative to AICHR, chairing the commission last year, I made it a point to initiate a landmark program to address the intersection of drug policies with human rights and health, focusing on the need for a more human rights-based approach to drug policy. We had representatives from the ASEAN senior officials on drug matters, ASOT, among others, attending. The training was conducted at a critical time, as the ASEAN work plan on securing communities against illicit drugs, which ran from 2016, came to an end in 2025, and a new one is in the pipeline. Discussions focus on integrating human rights into the traditional zero-tolerance approach adopted in ASEAN through two key principles. First, embedding the do no harm principle in law enforcement policies, and second, recentering health as a right to be protected rather than a service to be delivered. We are now in the process of considering, as AICHR, a common position moving ahead. The Commission on Narcotic Drugs, CND, as a principal policy-making body of the United Nations on all matters of international drug control, and as the governing body of the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, enjoys the strong support of governments in ASEAN, including my own. It is imperative that the United Nations commitment to human rights is meaningful action throughout all its works and policy. This ripple effect will have no bounds. Thank you very much. I hand the floor back to you, Excellency Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bon, for your presentation. And our last panelist for the event is Dr. Sato. Dr. Sato is currently UN Special Rapporteur for the situation of human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran and the director of the Institute of Crime and Justice Policy and Research at the Birkbeck University in London. Dr. Sato is renowned academic and criminologist and an expert in the death penalty and law enforcement. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam. Hello. I started my mandate as Special Rapporteur on Iran in August 2024. So last year, I presented my first report at the Council. There, I was alarmed at the number of drug-related executions in Iran, stating that at this rate in 2025, the total number could exceed 1,000. And next week, I will be presenting at the Council again, and a conservative estimate of the total number of death penalty execution is going to be over 1,600. Among this, around 800, so half, is for drug-related executions. And this is a conservative figure that I will be presenting at the Council. I think Harm Reduction International's report that's just published quotes a significantly higher number than that. So the number of total execution has increased, but in terms of the proportion of death penalty executions, that has remained the same. So consistently, it's been around half of the total number of executions has been for drug-related executions. I want to just also stress that during the nationwide protest that started on the 28th of December, during January and February, drug-related executions have continued. So even the protest, that has been a constant. I don't have information what has happened since the war had started, but that is to do with internet disruptions and also the CSOs not being able to get reliable information. But there are reports of such executions continuing, just not verified cases. Giada's already mentioned about the lack of transparency, and that also applies to Iran's use of the death penalty. If I compare the number of cases that's reported by Iranian authorities, they're not a total number. It's the reporting of individual cases through officials or through state media or state-linked media. So if I compare that figure with the numbers that CSOs report, will reach the conclusion that only around 7% of the executions are reported through official channels. That's the overall death penalty numbers. If we look at just for drug-related executions, that percentage from 7% goes down to 0.4. So the lack of transparency is very bad for drug-related executions. And for this, just a shout out to reports by Harm Reduction International, Amnesty International for their continued reporting and the continued reporting of annual statistics, which is enormously helpful in tracking trends as well as knowing an overall picture. As my role as rapporteur, I report to the General Assembly and also the Human Rights Council. But on a day-to-day, one of my role is to bring up individual cases and write allegation letters to Iranian authorities. Since taking up the mandate, I've been very interested in taking up more cases relating to drug-related executions. That has been a significant challenge. And I say this compared to other death penalty cases. It has been significantly easier to take up death penalty cases for individuals, for example, facing national security offences or cases of political activists. The limited number of cases where I have managed to get consent from either individuals or their legal representatives or their families, many of them are from Baluchi community, and their life is marked by poverty, undocumented status, as well as lack of due process protections and an over-reliance on confessions. And I think the reasons why it's been difficult to get consent on drug-related executions is that these individuals are not used to the UN mechanisms for political activists. They themselves often know about the UN mechanisms. Their family also know political activists or know the UN process. In that way, it's easier for me to get consent. But it's also combined by many CSOs working on Iran human rights. Their focus has been on political activists, not so much on drug-related executions. And I think the same can be said for my mandate as well. So this is something that I am working actively on at the moment. Next, I wanted to talk a little bit about the law that governs the use of the death penalty for drugs in Iran, which is the law on combating illicit drugs. There was a revision to this law in 2017, which was welcomed by the international community because it set higher thresholds for illicit drug quantities subjected to capital punishment. And I wanted to note that this revision, my understanding, was backed by, initiated actually by several European states who used the possible withdrawal of funding to Iran's drug program. And I think this is an example of active engagement through member states and also the involvement in UNODC. So this revision made in 2017 had a dramatic reduction in the number of executions for drug offences through several hundreds and all the way down to the 20s after 2018. But from 2021 onwards, the number of drug-related executions continued to increase, and now we are at the stage the number of drug-related executions are even higher than before the 2017 revision. So with this in mind, I was very excited to learn last year that the Iranian authorities are considering revising the law further, specifically to reduce the number of drug-related executions. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the limited information I have of this initiative, but I continue to engage closely with the Iranian authorities on this matter. I think I have a few minutes left, so I just wanted to say a few words about my impression of CND and my broader engagement with other UN agencies. This is actually my first time attending the CND, so I was a little surprised and also grateful that I was invited to the only side event that specifically deals with the death penalty and drug policy. So I just want to extend my congratulations to the organizers, Harm Reduction International, Amnesty International, and all the co-sponsors of this event. But I am very pleased to see that so many side events co-organized with AICHR trying to mainstream human rights into drug policy. I've been talking about the need for more transparency on drug-related executions in Iran. And one collaboration or initiative that could be done by UNODC is their focus on drug-related executions in the World Drug Report. I think here UNODC can play an active role in promoting transparency. Perhaps mainstreaming human rights in drug policy will be further achieved by a move from the OHCHR staff, some to Vienna. My understanding is that in the summer, at least the Iran desk will be moving, OHCHR staff on Iran desk will be moving to Vienna, meaning that OHCHR staff, as well as UNODC and missions in Geneva, could further collaborate in mainstreaming human rights dialogue in drug policy. And lastly, what I plan to do in my mandate is to at least have one report focusing on drug policy and human rights in the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is something that I have planned over a year ago, but due to different developments happening inside Iran, I had to postpone this report twice. So I'm hoping that I can focus on this topic at the next General Assembly. And I very much look forward to further collaboration with OHCHR, but I also look forward to engaging more constructively with UNODC and with the Iranian authorities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sato, for your intervention and for your presentation, and to all our panelists for your very insightful interventions. I would like now to open the floor for any comments or questions you have for the panelists. So please raise your hand. Yes.
Thank you, Ambassador, and good afternoon. I would like to make two very brief comments and then pose a question to the panel. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Minister Malik from Pakistan for his statement. We were very pleased to hear from him very powerful words and regarding all the advancement of Pakistan in this field, which for us is very important. Particularly, we were very pleased to hear also his remarks on legal aid for prisoners and for defendants that face these very serious accusations, and also the gender-sensitive part of his intervention is very important for us. Secondly, I would like to make a comment on the intervention of Ms. Sato. First, we support very much your role and we support your mandate. And secondly, we are very pleased to hear that your proposal of mainstreaming human rights into the work of UNODC. We have been advocating for that. By the way, I forgot to say I'm Jose Maria Bastida from Spain. So so that you know that these comments come from Spain. And then my question is regarding, we've been listening from the panelists all the advancement and all the problems and challenges that there are in several regions to avoid or reach a moratorium on death penalty. But I would like to hear from you what's your perspective from the civil society participation, and what is the role of civil society in somehow encouraging the states and the authorities to take steps into first a moratorium and then a total abolition of death penalty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe we can take a couple of questions and then have the panelists answer. Yes, please state your name and where you're from also. Thank you, Jose Maria.
Yes, good afternoon. Hi, everyone. I'm Gloria Lei from an NGO called the International Drug Policy Consortium. So I'm based in Thailand and I work in Asia. And I note the developments in Southeast Asia in particular. It's good to hear of some positive steps made in Thailand and Vietnam in particular, although I note that there are still probably many people on death row and where there continues to be the death penalty sentence, even if executions have not happened or there is a moratorium that is in place. And it seems from the data that it's only Singapore that's in the Southeast Asia region where there are still executions that I've seen. So I guess my question is advice from people in the panel, but for CND or for UNODC, on what could be done to encourage a shift away from stepping away from the death penalty, not just for Singapore, but also for the other countries where death penalty sentences are still imposed. And I think also for the delegate from Spain raising the issue around civil society engagement, because this is incredibly limited or non-existent or just severely repressed. I know in Singapore and Vietnam and other parts, as it is in other parts of Asia and the Middle East. So I think, especially in light of that, what advice would you share in terms of what member states and the UNODC could do through forums such as the CND or perhaps ASEAN as well? Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, so maybe we can start with Mr. Malik that has got a specific question and then move on to the other panelists for a more general comment.
Sure. Thank you very much to Mr. Jose Maria and Girelli as well for their interventions and for their comments. Specifically, beginning with, I mean, I can address whoever's before, but I think I'll probably start with ladies first. So, Gloria, so thank you for this. I mean, of course, it is very pertinent to see, and I think domestically, each country has to see for itself. I mean, for our case, in our journey back in 2023, of course, there were several judgments of the Supreme Court as well, and I'm happy to share the trajectory that we have sort of followed and our journey since 2023. Of course, through these judgments, the precedents of the courts at the Supreme Court, majority of the cases for drug-related offences, whether that involved a woman or a juvenile or even a male citizen or otherwise a person, in majority of the cases, when the cases went up to the Supreme Court, probably about 90 to 100% of the time, the death penalty would be turned into a life imprisonment because of the lack of cogent convincing evidence or other technical on technicalities, on issues of technicalities during the trial, at the time of the stage of the trial, or at the first appellate forum at the High Court, and then finally at the Supreme Court. So of course, this got us thinking that there's actually an issue at hand, and that this needs to be addressed. And then with engagement with the civil society, that obviously is very, very much interconnected. There's various organizations such as Amnesty International and domestically as well, JPP, Justice Peace Project, which is also one of the Justice Project Pakistan, which is one of the co-sponsors of this event as well. They actively work, and there are a number of other organizations that work on very pertinent issues, and particularly death penalty and legal aid and access to justice and so on and so forth. So of course, you need to have a look at the data of all the persons who are incarcerated for drug-related offenses, whether that sentence that is being handed down to the courts, does that sort of commensurate with the act itself, and then also seeing when it goes through various stages of the legal process, does that actually uphold at the highest level and the highest appellate forum? And we've seen this, through our sort of, data analysis of past several years since this law was promulgated in 1997. And we've seen that in majority of the cases, the death penalty was then obviously shifted and changed to life imprisonment, or it was just completely taken out altogether. With regards to one of I think the question was pertaining to moratorium, I believe. We've had a moratorium in place for the past 6 years, and there's been no executions whatsoever. And this is how we are hoping to go in the same direction for any offences, not just drug-related offences, but I mean, there is no more death penalty for drug-related offences. But for all the other offences as well, we've had a moratorium in place, and the engagement with civil society is very, very important, and we continue to seek guidance as well, and updates on various issues at not just the Ministry of Law and Justice, but also Ministry of Human Rights. So we collaborate with them very closely, such as, this is one of the events that we've also collaborated on to have come on board at CND, so as to not only showcase, because what we're looking for is not endorsement. We're looking for engagement, an engagement that goes far and beyond than our region. And of course, we're looking at South-South cooperation, and we've had a few meetings on that as well. And legal aid, access to justice, which is very, very important, because I have in the delegation the Director General of the Legal Aid and Justice Authority, which comes under Ministry of Law and Justice. And we have specifically just piloted a project now during the opening remarks, of which I made a mention, is we've identified 120 women that are incarcerated under trial for drug-related offences, and juveniles along with them. And we are leveraging the use of technology through AI and digitization to link the lawyers that we would have sensitized through a training on how best to deal with drug-related cases, and that too involving women and juveniles. So that's a pilot project that we have just sort of kickstarted, but we will be rolling this out in collaboration and coordination with the bar councils, the bar associations, and the civil society as well throughout the country. And this is what we're looking at. So we're using AI technology through this app that Legal Aid and Justice Authority has, and pairing and matching that up with and assigning those cases through AI. So I hope I tried to sort of cover all of the topics. But yes, engagement with CSOs of relevant ministries. I cannot emphasize enough of how important this is for their extra help and extra support, and maybe perhaps guidance as well in many cases. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sato or Ambassador Mijiddorj. If you want to comment, go ahead, Dr. Sato.
Shall I start? Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with the question from the Spanish delegation, the question about the role of civil society. I think civil society plays a tremendous role in terms of documenting death penalty cases in countries where there's lack of transparency, but also working on individual cases in collaboration with legal representatives in challenging the sentence, but also doing more broader advocacy on policy level, challenging the legislations, and also bringing constitutional challenges. But if I focus on civil society working on human rights situation in Iran, the CSOs used to get a lot of funding from the US State Department. Now that's gone. The capacity to document, work on individual cases has significantly diminished. And I think there is an opportunity here for other member states to step up and to support the civil society in this area. My role as Special Rapporteur has been to speak to the established Iranian human rights organizations for them to take up and look into the cases of drug policy and human rights in Iran. And one of the things I'm trying to do is to take up individual cases and write more in the reports. But I think there's a lot that CSOs can do. But at the moment, if I speak about Iranian CSOs, I think they want to do more, but they can't because of the severe funding cuts. From Gloria's, your question on stepping away from the death penalty and what are the learnings, I think it's maybe I say this because I'm an academic, but I think we need to look sort of more carefully about the positive developments in Malaysia as well as Indonesia, Pakistan. And I think we need to see to what extent those developments are transferable in the region, what contributed to the success, what we can learn. And I think in that area, I think academia can play a big role, but also international organizations can play a big role as well as UNODC. And in that, I think Harm Reduction International does an excellent job in coordinating various CSOs that work in different jurisdictions. I also think there's a role for states to play, as you mentioned about the experience of Pakistan, the experience of Malaysia, not quite abolishing, but abolishing the mandatory death penalty, and perhaps states that retain the death penalty but do not execute on drug-related offences. I think a discussion, including those states into the discussion, would be useful. But I don't have a concrete answer on to what extent one example in a country can be transferred, what are the causes, what is the sort of the bigger learning points, and would one lead to another? And so, yeah, but thank you for the question.
Thank you, Dr. Sato and Giada.
Thank you, Ambassador. And I love coming last because great points were raised already. I don't have to raise them again. I can be very quick. On the role of civil society, again, I have to reiterate, a lot of the work that all of us do relies on the efforts of local civil society organizations that operate with shrinking funding and under severe repression. And so when we, as international organizations or the UN, is able to provide figures, it's not because of our own work, it's because of the work of people in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Indonesia, Malaysia, who work in very sort of sometimes repressive environments, difficult environments on a very controversial issue. So these issues of funding and protection are key. We couldn't be working on the death penalty without them. They're also the ones carrying the sort of the weight of legal representation in a lot of cases, precisely because of the profile of the people who are facing the death penalty. Most of the times it's people from marginalized backgrounds who cannot afford lawyers. And so the sort of critical monitoring work needs to be sort of protected. And when we say monitoring, it's not just about figures, but it's also about monitoring trends. So again, if we talk about effectiveness of the death penalty in tackling drug use and drug crime, if we talk about systemic fair trial violations, so all of these angles are sort of raised thanks to the research and the advocacy of civil society organizations. In terms, and one last thing that then linking to the issue of evidence, I think the unique role of civil society is also to depoliticize the issue a little bit, and so to bring it back to the evidence and the individual stories. When we talk about the death penalty, it becomes political very quickly, and so we often move away from the evidence very quickly and start going into this kind of sort of black and white conversations that don't necessarily help. And so we care very much about the evidence because we believe that's where the answer around the death penalty lies. And so we believe in this role of depoliticizing. What we cannot do is change laws and policies, and that's where we need the ears of policymakers and diplomats. In terms of the role of UNODC, UNODC is the UN Office on Drugs and Crime, and so there's no better agency, in our view, to tackle this issue. What we can say from the outside is that there's a perception of deprioritization of the topic. The death penalty doesn't appear in the strategy of UNODC. There will be a new strategy soon, so we hope this will be remedied there. As Dr. Sato was saying, there's no mention of the death penalty in the World Drug Report. That's another missed opportunity for monitoring. And then there's sort of limited information about what happens domestically. So as you know, DC plays a very important role in supporting countries in their anti-drug control, in their drug control programs, but there's limited sort of engagement between civil society and UNODC from what we can know in terms of making sure that these programs promote restricting use of the death penalty. So we believe there's plenty of opportunities there. Maybe the last thing I say is that both UNODC and other regional and international platforms have a unique role in sort of bringing policymakers together. It's so precious to have people here like Ambassador and the Minister who can share their positive experiences. And we believe if we can put, everyone in the same room, and if everybody just started to talk to each other, we could find effective solutions. That doesn't happen because, we need someone to be willing to host that discussion. And, the UN is a great place to do that. So we hope it will take up that opportunity. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all our panelists. I think we can summarize the event by saying there's an alarming trend of almost doubling executions from 2024 to 2025, 40% of those being drug-related. We talked about a call to disseminate the right information, using the right systems, and wide coherence, inclusion of the topic within the expert panel, which I think is a very important issue that you raised. And also that all our communication and our discussion is evidence-based. We saw a lot of new policies, but we still have a long way to go. And definitely the CND represents an opportunity to bring together countries and other interested parties to find better ways of moving forward on these issues and being able to discuss all of this. Thank you again to Harm International and Amnesty International and all the co-sponsors. This is my second year chairing this event, and this year there's more countries than last year, and even Pakistan joining us, important. I think that next year we'll need a whole slide. So hopefully we'll have more and more countries joining the discussion, because it's something very important that we need to keep talking about and keep finding ways to move forward and bring that number down. Thank you everyone for being here.